please ask me, oh wait, I have to screen share. We're gonna get technical today. Now I'm gonna screen share.
Spooky.
Desktop 1, desktop 2.
That's not one into a mirror, so.
What?
One into a mirror, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. It's up to everyone. I know what to do. Is it working?
Yeah, Jim, you're good.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to post these slides real quick because there's a couple of links that I want people who are not here to be able to. I want people who are not here to be able to access that link. There's a couple of videos we're going to watch. Power. So I'm going to post this in the Slack. Who has my echo? I'm thinking myself talking. No, it's gone. Alright, good. So, I'm going to tell you a thing about audio today. We're going to learn about digital to analog conversion. We're going to learn about how it's stored digitally. We're going to learn about how it's then converted to analog, and then how it's processed and amplified in analog. So, for this talk, I had to learn a whole lot of things about being an EE without being an EE. I don't know any of the fundamentals. I didn't take physics 2, but I learned enough to be able to hopefully teach you guys about what's going on here. So please fill in the blanks if I'm missing something, and feel free to challenge my assertions and help me out if I'm struggling. Alright, so this is 2 parameters about how audio is stored digitally. So when you store a file, digital audio, you store it using these 2 parameters. You use bit depth and you use the sampling rate. Sampling rate is how often you're changing the value that you're using to represent the waveform. And bit depth is how many possible values there are. So the 2 formats that we're going to be looking at, and these are generalized, these are not file formats, these are general techniques that are used in file formats. So the bottom is used in some file formats and the top is used in others. The top is PCM, we're going to go over that, and then on the bottom it's DSD. Those are, DSD is a proprietary standard for pulse width modulation storage, and PCM is pulse code modulation. So we're going to go into what those are, why we should care about them, and why they're different and how they work. They both leverage these 2 things, but in different ways. So the pulse width modulation on the bottom is actually 1 bit depth. So there's 0 or 1. It's just 1 bit at very fast frequencies, very high sampling rate. Whereas the other is not as fast a sampling rate, but the bit depth is much higher. Usually, so in this one, it's 16 bit. So you have 16 bits to represent the value of the waveform between the bottom and the top. Yeah, he's talking about physics. So, is someone fielding questions for me? Somebody looking at the Slack so that if someone has questions.
Yeah, I said physics 2 things.
Okay, yeah, that's why I didn't take it. So let's talk about digital to analog conversion before we jump into how these things work. I'm just going to give you an overview of the techniques that people use to make. There's 2 silver boxes in front of us, for those of us who aren't here. This silver box is a DAC. This silver box is an amplifier. And we're going to talk about the technique for that silver box and other boxes like it. And those 2 techniques are multi-bit and delta sigma, also called sigma delta. So it's abbreviated SDM usually, but then it's usually said delta sigma. So they just switch it, it doesn't really matter. I thought it was really funny because there was an article that was literally just had said delta sigma modulation, and then in parentheses it said SDM instead of DSM. Nobody abbreviates DSM, but they all say it delta sigma. We're going to talk about the differences and go into how they work. And then we're also going to look at those 2 formats that I just showed for storing and how those formats match up with the DAGs. So, the first one we're going to talk about is the one that most of the time is actually used. It's the most popular, and it's usually leveraged because it is kind of straightforward to understand, and it's also easier to work with when you're mixing. So, as I said before, it has a high bit depth and a low sampling rate relative to the other techniques, specifically pulse width modulation. You can see here kind of what's going on, where you have your waveform, that is the red wave is what we want to sample. We want to encode this digitally. It's an analog wave. We'd like to make it digital. So you can see we basically measure it at a very specific interval. That's our sampling rate. And we store those points, which you can see aren't always actually on the line. Sometimes they're off a little bit. And that's because we only have so many values with this, because this is only 4 bits. So the one, this example is what happens when you try to store audio with only 4 bits. It's going to not necessarily match the waveform perfectly. So the more bits you have, the more exact you can be in matching the waveform with this technique. That's why you usually will see 16-bit or 21-bit or even 24-bit for storing these. We're probably going to come back to this topic soon. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sampling rate. So we talked about bit depth and what it kind of did there. Sampling rate is a little bit more picky because we saw that you need a high enough bit rate to capture the right accuracy of the level at which the wave is at. However, sampling rate gets a little crazier. So there's actually problems with sampling rate. Well, hold on, first I'll say higher is better. Higher bit depth is better, higher sampling rate is better for this format. So the higher you sample, the more points you're going to get, and the better you're going to be able to show the waveform. And when you have a very high sampling rate,
We apparently lost contact with you. I don't know how accurate that is.
can you guys still hear me?
Open chat. No, the Google chat. What? I'm sure.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now?
Oh, you just need to screen share apparently.
John, are you there right now? Yeah, I'm here. No, I'm in like at RPI.
Oh,
No,
screen
I'm
sharing
in
failed to
Seattle.
start. No session, no screens cast.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Jim, we can hear you, we just can't see your screen anymore.
Okay, well, give me 1 second. I'm gonna That's really weird.
Dude, Max, my phone just died at 30.
Get that replaced. I got mine replaced the other day. 2 days left on my quarantine.
Lithium batteries are, really unstable.
They're awful.
So, like, ouch. Diego, I was actually here about a couple seconds ago. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, there it is.
Alright, now you can see me and hear me?
Yeah, but you're not like, oh, there we go. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so you can see the screens?
Yes.
Wonderful. Alright, so back to what I was talking about. When we have a higher sampling rate, we can capture a better approximation of the wave. And the thing about sampling rate is that we need it to be super high, so high that you would think that we would never need it to be that high, but there's actually a reason. So you can see here that I've shown a picture of the same group of sample points being approximating 3 separate different waves. So these are completely different sounds. They're not even necessarily really related, except that those points are shared on the lines. So there may be some sort of weird music theory rule why these are related, but that's not important. The point is that you don't get this a super accurate approximation because if you're converting this signal without making any sort of assumptions, you're going to end up with just like it's going to guess, or it's going to like just go between all 3 of them. It's going to be a bad time. So basically, what actually has to happen is that you have to get your sampling rate over twice the possible range that you would like to do. So to say that a little bit better. The maximum hearing of a human being is about 20,000 hertz. Usually when you get older, it dips down quite a bit to as low as like 12,000 hertz if you're really old, for an average human being. But someone our age is usually between 16 and 20K. So in order to capture up to 20,000 hertz accurately, we need a very, very high sampling rate, so high that it's actually double. And the reason that we need it to be twice is because once we have twice the sampling rate that we want, the frequency for our maximum frequency, we can actually make the assumption that the wave that we're looking at is underneath half of the sampling rate. So if you see here, we have a bunch of different ones that fit. We have another picture here to go with it. This is called aliasing, by the way, when these multiple waves fit the same form. Here we can see this, if our sampling rate is 10,000 kilohertz, our Nyquist frequency, which is half of our frequency, is 5,000 kilohertz. And the waveform can approximate at 3 or 7,000. And we can see that they call this fold over, where you can have the 7,000 will actually approximate to in the same way that the 3,000 does. So if you have your sampling rate twice the speed of your maximum frequency, you can assume that you're not looking at anything halfway above. So you can, when you're approximating your waves back, everyone can agree that whatever wave we're looking at, it's not over half of the sampling rate. Does that make sense? Look who decided to show up.
Yeah, so is it maybe because, so if you go back to the previous slide, is it maybe because you have at least 2 points per every like period then of wave? I think that might be from like
yeah,
a
so,
signals perspective or
right, so when you double, you can get the same wave if you double the frequency. It will usually match the approximation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just because the period is times 2, it will still fit all the same points, presumably. That's why you have to capture, you can see this one's like 13, which is going to be about double one of these other ones. You have to capture at twice the maximum. That way you can always make the assumption that we're under that halfway point. And so that means that we have a most common frequency at 44.1 kilohertz. We have that because half of our sampling rate needs to be